to another episode of the PHX Founders Podcast. I'm here with Reid Hiatt, founder of Tactic. Reid, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. Would love to start with the origin story of Tactic. Not everybody sets out to start a company, let alone like a remote work company. I'd love to hear the origin story, like where you were before you started it, how you got the idea. But why don't we start out with just a quick overview for the audience of what Tactic is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tactic is it's a workplace management solution. We target hybrid companies, so companies that offer some degree of flexibility to their workforce of when they can work from home versus from the office. And what the software does at the highest level is it helps employees know when to work from home versus from the office based off of different things happening at the office and when people are going. And then it helps organizations understand how much space they're using, what type of space is most used, et cetera, so they can optimize the space over time based off of the behavioral patterns of their employees.
Okay. Interesting. We've got a lot to dig into, so yeah. I'm already connecting what you just described to I think what I know the origin is, but how did you get the idea for the company? Where were you?
Yeah.
And what were you doing that made you want to start this company?
So it happened all by accident. I was prior to Tactic, right out of college, I graduated in 2018 from BYU, and I took a job with Deloitte. I studied accounting, took a job with Deloitte back in Manhattan, and I was living there up until the shutdown happened in March of 2020. And right around that point in time, my wife was pregnant with our first. She was probably about 3 weeks away from her due date. And I remember I was on my way home from the subway. I had just received like an email from like all of Deloitte's, Deloitte corporate saying, hey, we're shutting down all offices indefinitely because of COVID. And I had seen it, and while I was on my phone, I saw articles saying how the hospitals were filling up. They were so worried about overflow at the hospitals in New York that they were talking about throwing tents up in Central Park. And so I kind of made a decision at that moment in time that I'm like, hey, as cool as it would be to have our first baby in a tent in Central Park, like that's probably not for me. And so I got home, Riley and I, we talked, and we decided, we're both from Arizona, we decided to fly back to Arizona the next morning. So we just packed that night, flew back with no return flight because we didn't know how long it would be. And that was my first, I promise there's a purpose to this, but that was my first experience ever working remote. I had never not worked in office. And
such a fundamental shift in the way we work, like transformative. It's easy to forget that, it's 5 years ago, coming up on 5 years ago, but really transformational shift.
I think it acted as a catalyst for what would have eventually happened over time. It just happened overnight. And so as probably most people, I think most people would agree with me. I think there's some awesome benefits of working remote, but there's also some drawbacks. And it only took me about 30 days or so of working remote that I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of getting sick of this. I miss being in the office. I miss seeing people. I miss interacting with them. And that was really where the idea for Tactic came from. It was, so Chris, my fellow co-founder, we've been friends since high school. I was on my way home from the gym on a Saturday, April of 2020. Him and I were just talking. And we were just talking about how it had been working remote because neither of us had worked remote before. And as we had that conversation, it kind of turned into, well, what do we think is going to happen when this is all done? Like, do people just go back to being in office every single day or is this here to stay? And as we both started talking, we realized, well, if we could choose, if we could wave our wand and say, like, this is how we want to work just as employees, how would it be? And we kind of settled on what would eventually be called hybrid. Well, it'd be nice to be able to work sometimes from home, but sometimes from the office and be able to like coordinate like when I go in with other people because the value of going to the office oftentimes is who else is there. And so that kicked off the conversation of like, okay, well, we called it Operation Yellow because we didn't have a better name, very original, but like it kicked off the conversation of like, okay, well, do we think software could do this? Like, do we think this is a big enough problem? Do we think software could solve it? And so we spent the next 6 months, Chris still technically I think was in school. So we started reaching out for a school project to people on LinkedIn, saying we thought HR was going to be pretty instrumental in this shift. And so we started reaching out to HR, like chief of HR, head of HR, different companies on LinkedIn saying, hey, we'd love to get your thoughts on how you guys are thinking about returning to the office, et cetera. And so we gathered about 6 months worth of data, just talking with people, not even selling them anything. And after about 6 months, we started to notice a pattern in how people were going to at least approach the initial return to office. And we thought, okay, we can be better than a spreadsheet. So that's when we started building. So we looped in our technical co-founder, Austin, who was great. And we brought him in to help us build the product. We had a couple engineers, and we were all working our jobs. This was just nights and weekends. And then that led to us launching the version 1, the MVP, in March of 2021. And yeah, we've just kind of been learning since, just on the fly learning now.
I love it. Mike Maples is of Floodgate Ventures. I think I got the name right. Like I listen to a lot of what he publishes. I don't know him, but he talks about inflections, insights, and ideas. And it sounds like there was an inflection here with, COVID, hybrid work being like a change in the way we work. You had an insight on, hey, people are going to need something different on how to work, and then an idea is the manifestation of that insight in your idea that you're pursuing. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah, yes, very much so. Yeah. I think it's funny. I don't know. Maybe I'm a very conservative person, and I don't feel like typically conservative people start software companies, right? It takes a long time to become profitable, right? And my background is accounting, so I'm very aware of how profitable we are at all points in time. But so Chris and I had the idea in around April. We launched our MVP in like March 15th, and we raised our first dollars in like May of 2021. So there was about 11 to 13 months in between when we first had the idea and when we launched and raised money. And for basically that year, I had actually just left Deloitte just a couple months after the shutdown and took a job I was really excited about. And I thought that was going to be my career, and I was pumped about it. It was something it was an industry I was really excited about, and it was not software. For the first year, I was like, kind of looking for reasons why not to do Tactic. Like I was looking, I'm like, oh, like this thing will happen and it just won't work out, or somebody will do a competitor will do something and it just won't.
This is like late 2020, early 2021.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it started to get more traction of like, yeah, this is like, I just was like, man, like I kind of don't want to do it. I'm like, I like my career path. And so I kept looking for reasons like not to do it. But every time like I thought something was going to stop it, it kind of just worked out, which is funny because everything stopped working out once I committed. No, just kidding. But
I do feel like a lot of people who build successful companies, there's something, I don't know if compulsive, like people feel compelled to do it. I feel called to do it. I feel drawn to do it.
Yeah.
Like I have to manifest this thing in the world or nobody else is going to. Like you almost feel like you have to.
Yeah.
Like it's your job to do it. Does that ring a bell? Or
no, resonate? Yeah. I think it's awesome when somebody decides to start a company. I don't have any data to support this. This is just a hypothesis. But my guess is that there's a correlation between people that start companies and their success and the opportunity cost of them starting that company. So like if they're leaving a phenomenal opportunity or whatever, something that they really enjoy or they're making lots of money to start a company, there's just a certain level, an increased amount of conviction I think that has to be present in that founder, or a belief that company is going to be super successful for them to pivot. And so for me, I think it was actually a really good process because I really loved the job I got in and the direction and the career and the life ultimately was going to lead me to. And it was really hard for me. Like I stretched that decision out until like pretty much as long as I possibly could. And then I was like, you know what? Even no matter what happens, I'll always wonder what if I don't do it. And I think I would rather not live with regret when it comes to, starting this company than live with the what if. I think that I just came to the decision that would be a lot harder for me. And I felt like over 12 months, everything that I thought was going to dissuade me from doing it, I saw them for what they were, and they were excuses. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to do it.
It's a really interesting insight. I think there's something to that. Like, what's the opportunity cost of leaving that is indicative of the conviction. One thing I do wonder, though, I mean, I know you have at the time you have like a young family, like there's a lot of pressure on that to, like you're not exactly in your peak earning years in that period of time.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of bills to pay and all that. But I also think there's a lot of young, smart, talented people that if you start a company and it doesn't work out, literally your worst case scenario is you just go get the same job you had before. I really do feel like more people should be taking big swings. I mean, I'd like you to react to this, but I feel like more smart, ambitious, capable people should be taking big swings, especially in a place like Metro Phoenix, because literally the worst thing that happens is you go get the same job you had before. That's my point of view. I'm an old guy now, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I don't disagree at all. I think that was a huge factor for me. I said, well, if I do this, I'm probably not going to be around very often because I have family members that have started companies and I've seen how much time it takes. And I'm like, okay, my kids probably won't see me very often. My wife probably won't see me very often, which is unfortunate. But I've seen the flip side of like when you put in the time, how much you get to see them later on, right? And I'm like, well, my kids won't even remember if I'm there as much now as they will. I mean, that's horrible to say, but like that was a big consideration of like, like I have less to lose now technically than I probably will hopefully later in my life. But with that said, it's obviously very risky starting a company, but I do feel like when you raise money from other people, like I think you accurately described the worst case scenario, which is, I can go get the same job again, right? But I do think that when you raise money from somebody else, like you have to, I mean, for me, like those dollars there's stewardship over those dollars. Like it's not just like, like if it gets kind of hard, I can just go get the same job. It's like, no, like I'm on the Titanic. If I'm on the Titanic, I'm the last one. Like I'm not getting on the life raft. Like I'm going down.
That's a really wonderful point, and I will emphasize, I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but I will emphasize the importance of stewardship. I mean, the flip side of what you're saying, and I felt this in my own founder journey, is when you have a job comes with a built-in option to quit.
Yes.
You can quit whenever you want. When you start a company and you take other people's money, it does not feel like you have an option to quit. Like I'm going to drive this thing all the way.
There's no plan B.
There's no plan B. And so I think that is a lot of emotional, psychological pressure that non-founders don't appreciate. That's what makes the job so lonely. Yeah, I think.
I can say it better. That's exactly. It's a weight. It's like and what's funny is I think most people know that, but you can't really comprehend the weight until like you have actually, you're carrying it. Like it's a weight. But with all that said, it's like it's a huge opportunity. I mean, like 1% of people ever get to have an idea that they come up with themselves and then have other people believe in it and then give them the resources to help make it a reality. Like, so, I mean, it's just, it's a weight, but it's also a huge blessing, a huge opportunity. And so, you kind of have to, it
is an incredible privilege to be a founder, but it's not as glamorous as people think it is.
Like, I actually don't tell people what I do really anymore because like, people think it's so much cooler than it really is, and I'm like, I just would rather not.
Non-founders have no idea how hard it is to build a company. Let's go back into the kind of the early days of Tactic. Yeah. There's always things that you get excited about. You have all this optimism until you get a product out in the real world and you realize, hey, this might not work after all. Yeah. Tell us about the early days and what were the reasons to be optimistic? And then I know there were some real low points in the first kind of 12 to 24 months after starting the company.
Yeah. So I joked that everything just kind of worked out when I was trying to look for a reason for it not to work. And then right when we raised money, it seemed like it all stopped working. I was only half joking. But our big hypothesis was that companies were going to continue post-pandemic. Companies were going to continue to use commercial space, but they would use that space differently than they had been using that historically. And there was going to be a software component that logistically help them solve the different use cases that they had in that new way of working, that hybrid model. And so that was our big hypothesis. And so when we first started building, we leaned very heavily into what was the first, I would say the first, I don't know if this is the right terminology, but the first iteration of the market, which was, it was very COVID focused. Like, it's hard to remember back then, but OSHA at the time was talking about like a $14,000 fine to organizations, like if they had a COVID outbreak and it didn't get reported and all these different things. And
it was crazy.
And so we leaned into that. We said, okay, well, this is a great go-to-market motion. We're just going to basically speak to these very COVID-specific issues to generate demand, and it worked fantastically. Like we were only outbound, we did no inbound, and our response rates, our conversion was very, very high initially because of that. We were competing against spreadsheets, and it was for something that it was just a CYA tool at the time, really.
Even vaccine tracking,
things like that, yeah. Like it was on everybody's minds, and there was no solution yet. And so we knew COVID was going to go away. We hoped it would, and we knew that this go-to-market motion was temporary, but we thought we had these tailwinds up until like June, July, August of 2021, at which point it sounds funny to say now looking back, but the Delta variant, like the first variant of the COVID virus came out, and it completely wiped out our pipeline because everybody was finally starting to reopen their offices. And so they needed a solution like ours that had some of the health components baked into it at the time, in order to do so covering themselves for any liability and whatnot. But then when the Delta variant came out, people were just like, yeah, we're not even touching this. Like we don't even know what's going to happen here. So we're just shutting down our doors indefinitely, until we'll pick it up again in early 2022. And so our pipeline just disappeared. And that was right after raising money, our first, our seed round.
That's
and
tough.
Our friends and family round. And it was very hard. But you do a lot of reflecting when stuff like that happens.
And soul searching.
In fact, I'll say it. My dad always told me I would say the best business advice he ever gave me was the most important business decision you'll ever make is who you partner with. And so I was fortunate that I had really, really good partners. That like they thought the same way I thought in terms of like, this is it. Like we're on the this is the Titanic and it is going down. We're drowning, which is a horrible, but like at that point in time, that's kind of what it felt like. You'd raised all this money, you felt this stewardship on your shoulder, and everything that had been working just stopped working because of a macroeconomic thing that you could not predict. It was scary. So we still had deals that we were working. It was much less. It was way harder to get demos. But we were still closing some deals, and the reality was that we did feel like we had enough breadcrumbs along the way to still kind of see the long-term picture. Like we had the conviction. It was just like, man, how do we make this happen faster? But the reality was the market. We were just too early to market. Like that was it. We had this initial tailwind because of the COVID element that we leaned into very heavily, and it took probably about 2.5 years, maybe 2 years. For the market to actually mature, because it's a new market. It wasn't a market that we were selling to that was really around pre-COVID. It took about 2 years until that market really matured and became something that was growing consistently and sustainably from what it was. And I could go all into, if you want, I can go all into that.
One thing I want to ask you about there is it's very hard for founders to know when they have product market fit for a variety of reasons. I mean, some of the reasons you're describing are market related. So it just took time for the market to develop, partly because of the Delta variant and other things in your case. But sometimes it's market, sometimes it's other competitive dynamics, sometimes it's some other technology like you're probably not going to be able to make something like Uber work without GPS on the mobile. Like baked into the mobile phone. And so there's just some technological advances you need to have. For certain markets, and then you need some market dynamics. But is that does that capture your challenge? Like you thought you had product market fit and then you didn't, and then you had to go find it again with something new and different?
Our big product market fit, and when I say we are too early, if I actually explain what that is, that was that we underestimated the length of commercial leases. So companies that invested in these 7-year commercial leases that fit they had a spot for every single employee because everybody was going in every single day. And so even when they did start bringing people back in post post the Delta variant and things started to normalize, they looked around, they said, we have way more space than we even need right now. And we can't really get out of our lease. We like signed it. We're stuck with it. You know, some companies would sublet and we would be able to sell to them. But like one of the biggest drivers today, while somebody uses Tactic, is they do have one of the biggest benefits of using a solution like Tactic and going hybrid just purely from a financial standpoint, there's other benefits, is that you can save a ton on real estate costs because you don't need every single person in the office every single day, and real estate's very expensive. So
less square footage, per employee.
Right? Yep. But with that, it introduces some complexity because you can't have everybody necessarily show up on the same day. And so it just took a long time for companies to define their hybrid plan. Everybody has, I think 3 out of 4 companies globally are hybrid now, stated hybrid. But there's no one size fits all. So some companies do it where they have everybody in office Wednesdays or Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then it's kind of choose when you want to come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some companies do like 100 remote days a year. They treat it like PTO used to be treated. 100 remote days a year, you can use it, but once you go beyond that, like you need to be in the other days. So there's a tons of different shapes and sizes for hybrid. And so it took one time for companies just to define, this is our hybrid policy. Like this is what we're going to do. And then from like an infrastructure standpoint, get out of their existing lease obligation to find a space that made the most sense based on their hybrid policy, their
different
office policy.
Type of space.
Yeah, different type of space. Downsize typically is what we're seeing. Downsizing of their space, creating that need for a solution to help manage scheduling and whatnot. And so that's what took so long. But the biggest benefit to Tactic was you want to solve a problem that's painful enough for people to switch or to buy, right? Like if a lot of people solve problems, it's just that they're problems people are okay with living with. Like they don't want to pay money to solve those problems. The big kind of inflection point for us was as companies started to define their hybrid policies and move to their spaces, they thought people were just going to come back to the office the way they had been, and they weren't. And so they started creating a department called the workplace department. And really what it was a group of people, a department inside the organization that owned what we solved. They owned that problem because executives were like, how do we get people to engage with our space? It's not, every executive wants the people in their office more. And so we finally had somebody that we could sell to directly that owned our problem and that was incentivized to solve it because that's literally what their job was.
Like a new buyer kind of emerged in most corporations. It's like a little bit of HR, but it's a little bit of facilities. It's like
people operations.
It's a little bit of a lot of things. Interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's its own department. Sometimes it's nestled under one of the ones you mentioned, like HR, people operations. But yeah. And so the reason that was so important was because once we knew who our buyer persona was, even if they weren't the decision maker, if they were just the influencer, we then could actually start marketing to a specific person. It was really hard to market to, chief of staffs and then HR and then facilities and then executive assistants because all the buyers were always different leading up to that point in time. It really wasn't until, the end of, end of 2023, the second half of 2023 that we started to actually see like a maturation process happen within our market and our buyer, and we started to have, that inflection point in the business.
So in the early days, I'll say even 2023, so a year and a half ago-ish, mid-2023, when did what kind of customers were you starting to get? Later on, I know you got some really big name logos, which we'll talk about in a minute here, but when did you start to feel the market pull, like, hey, this thing's really starting working, and then what kind of customers were those? Were they all U.S.? Are they small businesses, mid-sized businesses? Were there a typical profile, or right when you started to kind of re-inflect in 2023?
Right, okay. Yeah. So early on, we got some pretty cool logos. Like Grammarly is probably one that most people know about. Like that was very early. That was 2021. We sold Grammarly, and that's been great. We've worked with them for a while now, and they have an awesome team. But that was all like COVID stuff. Like that was.
And they kind of hung with you through all this.
Yeah, and they've hung with us through all this.
Awesome.
Yeah, they've been great. But we started to notice a shift. We were SMB primarily focused, so we were selling pretty small deals. And then in second half of 2023, by the way, one thing I should mention is when things got really hard, we realized it pretty quickly. Like we saw the market for what it was, and we believed it was a matter of when, not if. Like that was my big mantra, was like when, not if. I was like, if I logically connect like the information, the data points that I have available to me, our hypothesis of what's going to happen with workplace is going to remain true. It's going to take a minute to get there. So we made what I think the appropriate decisions, which were really hard decisions, but we said, okay, we have this much cash. We have to conserve that cash. So like, what spend are we using unnecessarily? And that led to like some really sucky decisions but you have to do it. Right? Like if you don't, then everybody loses their job, right? And so that was awful. I hate that. I hope I never have to do that again. But when we started to notice, so I'll back up, or I'll fast forward to the inflection point. We became very cash conscious, like super cash conscious. Like it was I looked at like every single dollar that went out of the business. I myself was doing the journal entry for it because I was like, we were so cash conscious, and our focus was to become break even as quickly as possible. Like that's truly what it was. Because we just didn't know what was going to happen, and we didn't want to have to rely on fate. And so we were just very, very cash focused. And then second half of 2023, we started to notice influx of inbound demand, which we had never done inbound demand. We'd always been outbound, emails, cold calls. That's what we had done. And some of the deals were like, I would consider more mid-market enterprise. One in particular was Red Bull. So like Red Bull came in our pipeline. There were some like IKEA. There were some big deals that started to come in, and we're like, wow, this is pretty sweet. And so we started to kind of look at like where channels were they coming from, and we realized like, oh my gosh, like we're spending so little money on these channels that are producing like these amazing opportunities. Like we should start pumping money into this.
Let's cultivate what's working.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did. So we started putting money into it. We were still very very cautious. Like, you know, I was like probably more I was probably more cautious than Chris wanted to be, and that's I think a good dynamic there because sometimes I can be accused of being cheap, you know. So like it's a good to have Chris to keep me honest there. But we started investing money. We started to see these deals ramp up, and they were larger opportunities. And what's funny is I remember always saying like, oh, once we figure out like the inbound process, like my life's going to become like so much better. You know what I said? Like I remember like once we hit this target and set monthly sales, like my life's going to become so much better. Like I remember like thinking like I'd made it to that point in time. Like once I made that, I was kind of like everything was smooth sailing. It's not the case, in case anybody wonders. Like, no, I wish I could go back sometimes to some of those problems, but we started to get these larger deals. Red Bull, I'll talk about Red Bull specifically. So Red Bull comes into our pipeline. It's a very long sales process. That was very different than our SMB deals. There's multiple like decision makers. There's almost
some kind of buying committee.
Yeah. Go through procurement, security, legal, you know, finance. You go through this whole process. It's a longer sales cycles. I'm sure nobody would be surprised about. And then they decided to buy, which is like, wow.
Now what?
Yeah. Now what? Right. And as part of that deal, there are some things we committed from a technology standpoint, but really it's just like the increased usage. That introduced some challenges for us, right? The product had been built for SMB customers, really, and we've been iterating, trying to find product market fit, and so we started to have some semblance of product market fit. You started to increase usage, and then you're like, oh wait, like some of this stuff is a problem, you know, from a technology standpoint. And so fortunately we had a really dedicated, like devoted, like CTO and technical co-founder in Austin and same with our other engineers, but it got really hard. Like super hard because we were still very cash conscious. It was a small team. And you know, ultimately what ended up happening was that deal highlighted some of the gaps.
Deficiencies in the product.
Exactly. And that helped us in some weird way. That actually helped us because
were those feature deficiencies? But also, if I remember correctly, Red Bull has 60 plus like locations around the globe. So were you managing the hybrid workforce for all of those locations? Like is that or some of those?
Yeah. So we weren't in all 60. We had done a deal for all of them. But then they were rolling them out in a phase kind of rollout based off like, right. So day one wasn't going to have all, it was just kind of this ongoing phased rollout to the different locations. There were things that we committed in the sales process from like a product standpoint, which we thought typically you don't really want to have to do custom feature requests, but everything they were asking for, we felt made the product better for everyone.
It was on the roadmap.
Yeah. And also their logo. It's, everyone knows Red Bull.
Got to have Red Bull. Got to have Red Bull. Yeah.
And so we thought it justified, making that commitment. And so it was both. There were some things we just didn't have because we committed to building them, and then also just increased usage, increased demand. So we went from selling maybe like a couple deals a month to 20 to 30 deals a month. And our engineers were. They were doing a lot. Like they were helping us implement. They were helping us. Like they were doing not just building. And so like when that amount of workload just increased on a small team in a very scrappy environment, just put this. Quite honestly, I think it almost was an unrealistic expectation that was placed on the shoulders of those guys. But we had to do it. Like that was just kind of the name of the game. And that's why the problem I say like, oh, once we do this, everything's gonna get better. It's like, no, it got worse. Like. In a good way, it got worse. And it was really hard. We ended up having, Austin, our technical co-founder, he ended up deciding to step away from the business, and he was awesome about it.
Yeah, that's always tough. I want to ask a couple follow-up questions. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are founders who would love to make the jump from SMB to enterprise. Yeah. They would love to be able to have the likes of IKEA and Red Bull, and I know you've onboarded some even more.
Hewlett-Packard is our biggest one.
Hewlett-Packard, more enterprise. And bigger. And so when you think about those types of customers, going from SMB to those types of customers, what are some of the other things you've learned besides you've got to have an evolution of features, but are there other things inside the organization you've had to learn to change or manage, either sales process or onboarding or anything else?
So the sales process is like totally different. So you have to, we're still figuring it out, to be totally honest. Like I'll just be candid, right? Like I wouldn't consider ourselves like this great, we're continuing to move into enterprise. And we are still primarily inbound. That's in fact, it's right before I came up. Not like American Eagle actually just booked with us like right before.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's it's a good sized deal. We'll see if we sell them, but so we're primarily inbound, and I think traditionally, I could be wrong, but I think traditionally, if you're an enterprise deals typically get worked via outbound. Like you find the companies that you want to work for, you reach out to them, you hit them up, you build relationships over time, and so we're trying to get that engine started.
Yep.
Right now, our enterprise and mid-market deals are generally generated via inbound. The sales process is just so long. So HP, I'll give an example of HP because I think it highlights it. We first engaged with HP in July of 2022.
Wow.
And I remember I was on the demo with that one. It was a great demo, and they had 18 months left on their contract with their current provider, and they hated it. And so I was like, oh, this is great. And so we ended up developing a relationship just like every month we check in over like 6 months. And then after 6 months, you just get busy. And I'm like, I can't, like, there's this small chance that this actually turns into anything. So like it kind of fizzled and died. And then over 12 months later, just earlier this year, they reached out in like March of 2024. And they're like, hey, our contract's expiring. We're running a process. It's you and 2 other vendors. Would you guys be interested? Like, yeah, we'd love to do that, And like we hadn't talked to them in like over a year. So we had generated a relationship with it. I don't think that's traditional. Like I don't think that's the right way. But I will say when it comes to enterprise, what I have come to understand is one, there's not one buyer. You have to sell you have to sell the first person you talk to just to have an opportunity to sell the other 15 people you're eventually going to have to sell.
You got to be great at building multi-threaded relationships,
absolutely.
Right?
You have to. You have to be able to sell to, in our case, the workplace person, but then you have to sell the IT person, and then you have to be able to sell all the different constituents, because at that size, it's not something that one person can push through. Typically the person that you're selling is not even a decision maker. They've been just tasked with going and doing research. So we try to educate on our sales calls because we recognize that the real selling that's going to happen initially is going to be done by the person we're talking with. Like they're the ones that are going to have to sell tactic to those other constituents to give us the chance to get on a call with them and then sell them. Collateral is also super important as part of that. Like if you can have really good, I think we can improve here, but if you can have really good
like sales and marketing content.
Yeah. Sales and marketing content that you can share, that really highlights what you guys do, because a lot of you're just trying to arm this person with as much information as they have. so that when they try and go sell this thing that makes their daily life better, that's why they're the ones that are tasked with finding it, to convince the people that have their daily lives don't change at all. Like they're just a decision maker, but they're not ever going to interface with the software. You just want to try and arm them with the tools to be able to convince those people that, hey, it's worth it. And typically the best way to do that is by doing some type of hey, this is actually going to save us money or make us money.
Some business case with maybe a case study or reference. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
So,
no, those are great insights on the difference between selling to SMB and going enterprise here. I do think the relationship you mentioned, the HP relationship, took a long time, went dark for a little while.
Yeah,
that probably is more typical.
Oh, is it? That's good to know.
I think in an enterprise relationship, people may say, they don't say no. It's more like not now.
Yeah.
Because people get busy and other projects take priority. So I do think there's a pattern in that. But there's a lot to learn in that transition. It does speak volumes. I was going to point one thing out. I don't know if you know this, but we've known each other for a few years. We watched the business go through those rough years before we invested.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted to back you. We thought the space was generally interesting, but the single most compelling diligence that I did and our team did is I watched the demo video that Chris did for HP. I watched the way that he demoed the product. I watched the questions that they asked. I watched the way that they, the things that they were curious about. I watched the barriers that, the objections that they would pose, and then how you handled the objections. And Chris handled the objections. And I do think a lot of founders may not know this, but people, if their investors are doing real diligence, there's nothing more valuable than real customer case studies, including watching a demo that you did for what became your largest customer. So it was really compelling.
If I was investing money in early stage businesses, that's what I would weight very heavily, just demos. You're obviously going to get spoon-fed the best demos, right? But if there's enough there, then you can extrapolate that out. But yeah, HP was a great example. It's also really interesting. The problem sets are just different for large companies. Truly.
What were some of the differences for you between other, that you saw with some of these bigger customers? You talked about some of them previously.
Yeah, smaller companies, they're more nimble. So they I think want more smaller, in our space specifically, smaller companies just typically have different problems. At the enterprise level, HP has 60,000 employees, and they're 300 locations. So
it's different than I got 16 employees, right?
Yeah, and one office space, right?
Yeah.
It's just logistically, it's so much more complicated in one versus the other. You have different languages that are being there's just different. I think enterprise, it's about stability, reliability, relationships. Whereas I felt the SMB was more just about do they like us the most?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Do they like our product and they get a good feeling, the person that's on the call, do they feel good? That will help them.
Yeah. Small companies aren't doing an RFP, for example, right? Yeah.
So
there's no purchasing department.
No. But yeah, it's a different sell. I think that, for us, it makes the most sense in our business model. It makes the most sense to be enterprise because there is a very manual implementation process that happens. And that implementation process, it doesn't make sense for us to sell certain small deals because the implementation process outweighs the cost, right? And so I think it really just, I think that the market, we started out with a PLG. We wanted to be a PLG motion. We build this product, make it super easy to onboard companies. People can come in. That was the idea for Tactic in 2021, in 2020, even probably early 2022. Heck, I think we were maybe even talking about early 2023 of let's streamline this implementation process and do. And then we just realized no, people are trying to figure out how to do hybrid successfully. This is a consultative sell. They're coming to us not just to buy a product, they're coming to us for advice.
Yeah.
And so maybe that will change in the future, but right now, we spend a lot of time on helping people walk through how to use Tactic and how to think about hybrid and what other companies are doing and educating them just on the space because we do this every day. They're doing it one time for the first time with their company. And yeah, like I think a PLG motion's great, and I think maybe in the future we work on that, but it just doesn't make sense for
There's
us.
a little bit of market education that has to happen that just like
market maturation is just not quite.
Yeah, you can't have a hands-off approach. You know, it is interesting when you think about where we are in the timing of that cycle. I do think there are a lot of people that are not renewing their leases, and that's been true for the last year. I think it's going to be true for the next 5 to 10 years, where people are looking for not just new space and less space, but fundamentally different space, more amenities. And do you see that in is part of what Tactic doing is managing not just less space per employee, but also different types of space with different amenities?
Yes, that's 100% what we're doing. So we're actually building it so it's more robust than what it is. But right now we have 3 products. So we have desks, rooms, and visitors. Like those are the 3 pillars that I would say we have right now. Desks and rooms by a wide margin are more common than visitor management. Visitor management's almost its own thing. But typically we see, I think like 80% of our customers use both desks and rooms. And it makes sense because we have like this nice interactive floor plan. You do that. But what we started seeing is a lot of people are they've had us add, lockers, like you can reserve lockers, dog beds. I mean, we even have some people that use like scooters, which we can't move the scooters around on the map. So like they just earn them out. And so I think what's happening is that Grammarly is a good example. Like they're remodeling their space fundamentally to adjust for how people are using the space now versus how they used to use it. It's just different, like less cubicles. I think people would rather have a nice, smaller space than a more dry, larger space because heads down work oftentimes happens at home. So like when people come in, they want more meeting rooms. They want, they want to change the dimensions of the space. And so what we do with Tactic is we say, okay, well, standing desks or sitting desks, for example, like standing desks are more expensive than sitting desks. So you probably want to know how much is our standing desk getting used 100% of our time and our sitting desks only used 25% of the time? Because if so, we should probably buy more standing desks. It's probably worth that investment.
It means our employees value it.
Yeah, our employees value it. If it's like, hey, we still there's no point to buy more standing desks because we have standing desks and they're not all getting used, right? So like we try to focus, help companies identify like those opportunities within their workspace of like, we should invest in X or we should invest in Y based off of what's getting used and what's not getting used. If even it goes down to conference rooms, if like conference rooms that fit 15 or more people are never getting used, like maybe you cut that up into 3 because the huddle rooms are getting used way more commonly. So we're still very much in a learning phase when it comes to
those types of analytics are kind of what's next. I was going to ask you what's next for Tactic, but you've got desk, rooms, and visitor. But the analytics and the workplace analytics, what people are using, how they're working, how they're engaging, is that what kind of your next leg of the vision is?
Oh, I have so many things. I could, yeah, but yes, that is part of it for sure. And I'll do my quick thing. I think that at a high level, macroeconomic level, you've had in workplace technology, which is where we play, you've had a very fractured industry in that like a lot of the workplace tech solutions, they do one thing, right? Like the visitor management solutions have existed since 2012. Room bookings have been around since like 2013. And that's all they did. And I think what's happening now is there's the world is moving towards a single system of record in workplace technology.
Convergence.
A convergence where they don't want desks and rooms and visitors and ticketing, all these things to be separate. They want it in one platform. And so at a high level, that's what we're going for is how do we act as like the end user, the employee interface to a lot of these back office solutions that have historically existed separate from one another and just make it really, really easy to use.
That could be case management also for like facilities or IT support, like all those other things. Yeah, that's a big market. Yeah, no, it's. I think the market opportunity is actually larger than I most optimistically anticipated back when I was at my most naive in 2020. And I would say the other thing that I don't want to, I hate talking about AI because everyone talks about AI, but it's interesting, and then I'll stop with like future stuff. But we have, when I look at what assets we have, like in terms of integrations or code or whatever, we have 3 integrations that I would consider pretty big assets. We have access to, for a company to use Tactic, they typically will connect their employee directory, their HRIS system. Yep. So we have a list of all their employees that are loaded into Tactic, and that's so they can provision and deprovision user accounts in their HRIS system.
You then have access to all resource availability. So room and desk availability. Like, is this room booked? Is this desk booked? You have access to that. And the last thing that we have access to is employees' calendars, because there's a sync that happens when you book your desk or when you book your room, it pushes your calendar. So there's a calendar sync that happens. And so when you look at those three assets, and then we also have Slack and Microsoft Teams integrations, which is typically what people are
using to communicate. Yeah.
So the last piece, more for end users, that I think is something that we're very interested in building, is essentially a personalized scheduling assistant for every single employee. So for example, if I want to meet with you, I could, in Slack or Teams, because it would just be embedded, rather than build our own interface, we just build it in there and say, hey, I want to meet with Gregg. I need to meet with Gregg for an hour sometime before this Friday. Can you find a time that works for both of us and book it? And it would go and look and see what day you're in the office, what day I'm in the office, see if there's an overlap there, find a time that both you and I are available for an hour, and then find a room that fits that time, and then book it and send me the confirmation details.
Yeah. Like an intra-company scheduling agent, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Connection agent. That's really interesting.
And I think people would really, really like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, before we go to closing questions, anything we didn't talk about Tactic? I mean, you're coming off of a really big year. You've just about tripled in the last year. Coming off of even a super interesting 2023 where the business really started to inflect. We invested summer of 2024 here, so we're early in our period here. But what's next for 2025 here? That this will be airing in early 2025 here. But what's the big plan for 2025 and beyond?
We want to do the same thing we did with revenue this year that we did last year.
I'd like that too. That'd be amazing.
I would say the thing that we didn't talk about or whatever that I think is worth saying to people that are interested in raising money or starting their own thing is capital is really important. I don't think every single company, in fact, I would prefer to have built Tactic without ever raising $1. I would rather have 100% equity than give up equity.
I totally agree.
If you can do that, for some reason, I feel like it's like a mark of pride to raise money. People think it's like they've made it I think it's the opposite. I'm like, I look at all the bootstrap companies and I'm like, that's incredible. Like, you own so much of that, for some industries like ours, you can't build what we're building without raising money. It's just, you have to have money to in order to make it work. And I would say we've had a lot of hard things that have happened, like a lot. And who you raise, you have your operational partners, like Chris and Austin have been such good partners for me. Like, truly, like I could not pick better partners. Like I did not anticipate how hard it would be. I knew it would be hard. I didn't anticipate how hard it would be. And I also didn't anticipate how good of partners they would be when it was hard.
Yeah, having co-founders is a game changer when things are hard.
And then the second thing is you have your investing partners, like the people that put money in. And it's important. It's really important to look beyond just the capital and look at the relationship there, because if your investors don't believe in you or don't believe in your market, when things get hard, it just, you need people. Like, sometimes you just need somebody to be like, you guys got this, you're good, And so I'd say, like, if you have the ability, if you think you need to raise money and you have the opportunity to raise money, you definitely want to try and find the partners that you think. Everybody acts good when things are good. You want to find the people that how do they act when things don't go according to plan? In fact, that's what I asked when you guys were raising. I said, can you guys connect me with a founder where things didn't go well? Because I just wanted to know, like, I knew you guys were going to be great. I thought you guys were going to be great no matter what, obviously, but I knew you guys would be great if things were going great. But I wanted to know, like, how do you guys show up when things aren't going great, aren't going according to plan? And I think that that's something I don't think that's something I really thought about.
It is hard. I mean, I really appreciate you saying that, to offer this as a counter. Well, not a counter, but the other side of the view here. First of all, I totally agree that venture is a niche. It's a niche instrument that should be used in select cases, right? One, you need capital to scale something really big.
Yes.
If you can't get really big, it makes no sense to raise venture. And so it's got to be, the founder has to have outsized ambition in a market that can actually scale and build and grow and evolve in something that's big and interesting and meaningful, in a long-term capital efficient way. And I tell founders that all the time. If you can avoid raising, you should. The one thing I would say about, I think it's really great advice to founders to be careful who you take money from. I will say, though, it's hard as an investor, especially a former operator like me. It's hard as an investor when something's not going right in a company. It's really hard to not be excessively direct. And what I mean by excessively, which is easy to do because like I'm not the one who has to solve the problems, right?
But I think that's helpful though, honestly.
Not everyone does. That's what I was going to say is when things haven't gone well, one thing that I wish I had on the other side of the table was someone who would engage in real conversation, like engage with the truth. Like sometimes I've invested in companies where like board meetings feel like sales efforts. And that's not constructive. Like I'm okay with bad news. I'm fine with bad news. I love bad news if it turns into action.
Yeah.
But my experience on the investor side has been not everybody appreciates direct feedback. And sometimes while capital raising is a sales effort on the founder's part, you got to stop selling in the boardroom once you raise capital. And that has to be a place where only truth prevails. Like that's all there is. And I've found that that's not as true as I had hoped to be at first. So I think it's good to surround yourself with people that, like you're saying, that want to like how they'll react when it's hard. But conversely, founders need to seek out feedback. You're one of those founders who seeks out feedback and engages with truth.
The reality is the truth will come to light, and the worst situation you can be in as a founder is where the market is telling you the truth. That's why I appreciate it. Like when Brett, who's on our board,
Brett Larson, founder of eVisit.
Yeah, he sits on our board and
now chief.
Yeah, and he would tell me the truth, at least the way how he saw it, and based off of his much more expansive experience, over.
He's great at that. He's really great at that.
And the reality is, I'm glad, we ended up making decisions that we would have had to make because the market would have told us you have to make this or else you're going to go out of business, but 8 months later. And we would have had 8 months less capital that we just burned through. And so, I don't know. I think that, I think it's hard. I think there's a way to give direct feedback, obviously, but I think if you're afraid, if I don't like hearing, hey, you really, you dropped the ball. That sucks.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah, it's hard to hear. But if you reflect and you say, yeah, I've dropped the ball, that is the best thing that can happen to you because you at least have time to fix it. Usually when the market's telling you that you dropped the ball, it's over. You have no more time to recover. And so I've become a much more anxious person since starting Tactic. Right?
That's not good.
Yeah, no. But it's because you're just looking you have so many balls in the air, and you're just if one gets kind of close to the ground, you're that's too close to the ground for my comfort level, and that's to say sometimes you let the ball hit the ground and crack because you're but it's intentional. It's I have to let that ball go. Just you can't keep all these balls in there, and this is the least important one. But yeah, I really appreciate it. And I can see why it's a very emotional thing building a company. I can see why people would have a hard time taking it the hard way. But I also think it's that's why it's so important, I think, to have a relationship outside of the boardroom. Because usually if you're having these conversations in the boardroom, you probably don't have the relationship that you need in order to get through what you're going through with the least pain possible, right? The boardroom is 100% where truth needs to prevail, but if you're bringing up there shouldn't be surprises in the boardroom. I think you should be at least. I don't know. That's
we board meetings are happening more and more remotely, and one of the things and that's not necessarily bad, but one of the things that results in is fewer board dinners the night before the board meeting. That's kind of been a tradition that's been happening for years in early stage companies, board dinner the night before. And I think that's really unfortunate because to your point, you've got to build relationships outside the boardroom. So I think that's really wise of you to see that. Anything we didn't talk about with Tactic that we should talk about? And if not, we'll go to closing questions.
No, let's do closing questions.
What's something you're thankful for?
Can I do 2 things?
Yeah, or 3.
There are 3. All right. I'd say, I'm very grateful for my wife. I think that she doesn't work on Tactic, but it's so much harder to do what we're doing than people realize, I think, than I even realized. But I think it's even harder. it's hard for me, but at least I'm doing it. Like, so I at least feel like I have a control on it. Like my wife, Riley, she just has to believe that I can do it, like she just has to believe in me even when it's hard. And I think that would be a lot harder.
Been there.
Yeah. And so I'm super grateful because like the reality is like, I would not be able I wouldn't have been able to continue to work on tactic and have even made it through that, like that dark period. If I didn't have somebody that was like, yeah, like you can do this.
The founders are special. I believe that. The husbands and wives and, partners, significant others of founders are also like truly special. Thankful for them.
I can do it. So, I'm super grateful. And then the other thing I mentioned a couple of times, but good partner, like good co-founders, like truthfully, people say like, don't start businesses with friends or whatever, cause it can ruin relationships. I'm not like, and I actually think that there's a lot of truth to that, but fortunately for me, Chris especially, like he's been an amazing co-founder, but, he backs me 100% of the time. I'll back him. But the more important thing is that like when I'm being dumb, he'll call me on it and say, that's a bad idea. And I can do the same thing. And we have a relationship where we don't have to pull punches. We can just say how he is. It's because we argued about sports all growing up. And so now we're just arguing about business.
How many times a day do you guys talk? Like including late into the night.
Oh, we probably talk. We have had a continuous conversation going probably for like 4 years now. Like it just never stops. It's just always, and then like randomly there'll be like a sports thing thrown in there. Like, but it's just like the conversation never ends. And then we probably talk on the phone, 3-4 times a day. And that's not including like the texting that we're doing like all the time. So it's just never, and the reality is like, I like talking about work with Chris, and that's I think the big thing. And so, it happened kind of by accident, right? Like Chris and I were just talking, we were friends, and I've heard bad stories, and I think that's totally possible. But, whether it's somebody you know or you don't know, just having a good partner. And again, it's the same thing with investors, a partner that is good, not just when things are going well, but a good partner when things are going maybe not so great. There's like no amount of capital can, I think, fix that.
Yeah, you have to like your co-founders for sure. Yeah. You guys debate? You guys argue?
Oh, sometimes we just disagree, not because we actually disagree, but we just think the other person is getting too much credit for their idea. So yeah, we debate all the time. I would say that's probably the basis of our relationship. We just love arguing with one another.
So I do believe that people talk about the importance of co-founders, and I do believe that sometimes that's a little bit too simplistic. I think having co-founders where constructive debate is a feature of the co-founder relationship, like debate that resolves. When I say constructive, it's debate that's like productive and resolves, like toward progress.
Yes.
To me, it's not about arguing. There's no value in arguing. There's value in debating to get to the right answer and do that. But I think sometimes people say simply, you have to have a co-founder to be successful. I don't believe that generally, but I also believe if you're going to have co-founders, the one feature you have to have in your relationship is you have to have productive debate,
100%.
Debate that resolves.
100% agree. Like quite frankly, I would say most of the good ideas when it comes to product have come from Chris, like truly. And it's like, he's
as a sales leader, like he has a lot of good customer insight. He's not a product guy, but he's got great customer insight. He's talking to
customers all the time. And the other thing that's really important is I don't feel like neither of us are the type of personality where like we both have to die on the same hill. Like I have my hills that I will die on, and he has his hill that they die on, and thankfully they don't really overlap all that much. But even when it does, Chris and I we'll fight sometimes, like not physically fight, but we'll argue, and we'll both feel very passionate that we're right and we both have different opinions. But I will say that even if I'm not 100% sold on what we decide to do, or he's not 100% sold on what we do, there's no pulling. There's not like this, like, oh, I'm not going to go in all in. Like
you decide and commit.
Yes, you decide and commit, and that's it. And it's like, hey, and then usually what we'll do is we'll say, okay, if it doesn't work, this well by this date, then we'll revisit. And so, you just put kind of like a threshold in there of like that you both feel comfortable on if you're not. Anyway, so we have our things, but anyway, I do think that that's probably the most important thing. If you do not have a co-founder that you can just be super on, it's just, it's a song and dance with so many people building a company and so many different personalities. You kind of need to have a co-founder that you can just like,
be real.
Yeah. You can just be like, look, man, that's a horrible idea and you should stop doing it. Truly.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Best place for tacos in Metro Phoenix?
Oh, okay. This is the most important question. Main Street, Taco Chihuas. I think they have the best tacos.
Main Street in Mesa.
Yeah, in Mesa.
I do like Tacos Chihuas.
Tacos Chihuas.
Simple.
Authentic. They don't have chips and salsa, which is the one downside. I love chips and salsa, but for some reason that makes them more authentic.
Why do they not do that?
I don't think they do chips and salsa in Mexico. I could be wrong. I think that's more
like they're like, why bother?
Yeah, and their tacos are just so good. So.
They are so good.
Anyway, it's my
cool. Reid, thanks for all you're doing. It's so fun to see the progress. I've been watching the company before we invested for a couple of years. Since we've invested 6 or 9 months ago here, growth has been phenomenal. Execution's been great. It's been fun to see how you handle challenges and problems in the business, and love to see how the teams really kind of continue to evolve and step up as well. So that's been really fun. It's fun watching the Tactic company building journey. So congrats on all your success.
Thank you.
And thanks for being on the PHX Founders Podcast.
I appreciate it. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.